There's a particular kind of cold that settles in your bones when you realize your family doesn't see you as a daughter, but as a resource. My moment of clarity came through a phone call. My mother's voice was smooth as silk, asking me to stake my entire career on a beautiful lie to save their reputation. "Do this for us," she said, "or don't bother coming to your sister's wedding." It wasn't a choice between right and wrong. It was a choice between my integrity and their acceptance. They never dreamed I'd choose myself. Before we jump into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories reach and connect with amazing viewers like you. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next surprising turn in our journey. Now, get comfortable and let's dive into a tale that will leave you inspired and intrigued. My name is Mia Vance, and for most of my life, my profession has been my sanctuary. In my quiet office at Christie's, surrounded by the tools of my trade, a gemologist's microscope, velvet-lined trays, and reference books thick with history the world makes sense. My job is to determine value, to distinguish the authentic from the fraudulent, the real from the masterfully crafted fake. It's a skill built on precision, knowledge, and an unwavering respect for the truth. I never imagined that the most critical appraisal I would ever have to make would be of my own family. The first tremor of the coming earthquake arrived not as a shout, but as a quiet digital notification on my screen. It was an alert from my bank, a polite message informing me that the supplementary credit card, the one my mother, Catherine, used with elegant abandon, was approaching its limit. I stared at the list of recent charges: a spa weekend, a series of lunches at the city's most exclusive restaurants, a deposit on a floral arrangement for my sister Sophia's upcoming wedding. With a sigh that felt as old as our family name, I approved the temporary increase, a familiar ritual of propping up the beautiful, crumbling facade of the Vance legacy. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. It was a selfie, her face glowing with practiced joy. Around her neck was a cascade of diamonds, a replica of the legendary Vance necklace, the heirloom that was supposed to be her something old. The caption read, "It will be perfect for the wedding. Won't it? Sis." My professional eye caught the flaws instantly, the slightly imperfect symmetry in the setting, the way the light failed to refract with the fire of true Golconda diamonds. It was a beautiful lie, and they were about to ask me to become its co-author. The official request came, as all important family matters did. Over a formal dinner, the table was set with our ancestral silver, each piece polished to a mirror shine. But I could see the fine scratches that time and desperation had etched into their surfaces. The air was thick with unspoken expectations. After the main course was cleared, my mother cleared her throat, placing her hands delicately on the table. She spoke of tradition, of legacy, of the importance of presenting a united and powerful front to the Davenports, the staggeringly wealthy family Sophia was about to marry into. Then, she confessed, the real Vance necklace, the one that had been the cornerstone of our family's lore for generations, had been sold years ago to settle one of my father's many hidden debts. The piece Sophia had was a high-quality replica, but a replica nonetheless. My father, Richard, stared at his plate, silent as always. Sophia, however, looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. Their plan was as simple as it was audacious. They wanted me to use my professional connections to borrow a near-identical, authentic diamond necklace from a collector or a museum for the wedding weekend. They needed me to help them commit fraud. I placed my fork and knife down gently, the clink of metal on porcelain sounding like a gunshot in the tense silence. I explained, in a calm and steady voice, that what they were asking was impossible. It was a career-ending, reputation-destroying act of professional suicide. It was unethical. It was, quite simply, a lie I was not willing to tell. The warmth in the room evaporated instantly. My mother's face hardened into a mask of disappointment. Sophia's eyes filled with tears of theatrical betrayal, accusing me of being jealous, of never wanting her to be happy. The argument ended in a stalemate, but the final blow was delivered later that night, over the phone. My mother's voice, stripped of all its earlier sweetness, was cold and sharp. "Your entire career was built on the prestige of the Vance name," she said, her words precise and cruel. "It's time the name got something in return. You will either find a way to help this family maintain its dignity, or you will no longer be considered a part of it. Don't bother coming to the wedding." And then she hung up, leaving me in a silence that was heavier than any shout. The final line she delivered was the one that broke everything. "Your value to this family lies in your connections. Mia, if they can't be used, you're useless." That was their ultimatum, my integrity, or my family. They believed they were putting me in an impossible position, forcing my hand. They never for a moment considered that for me. There was no choice at all. In that cold, echoing silence. They had not trapped me. They had set me free. The decision was made before the line even went dead. I would not be attending the wedding. I would not be participating in their lie. Instead, I would take a trip Sophia had always dreamed of, the one she'd been unsubtly hinting I should help pay for as a wedding gift, her honeymoon destination. Sitting alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop. The city lights of Boston twinkled outside my window, indifferent to the quiet shattering of my world. My fingers moved across the keyboard with a newfound purpose. I didn't search for ways to appease them or for last-minute solutions. I searched for flights, one way, to the Maldives. The price was extravagant, a sum that would have covered my mother's credit card bill for 6 months. But as I clicked confirm, I didn't feel a pang of guilt. For the first time, I felt a surge of exhilarating power. This money was mine, earned through my expertise, my integrity, and I was finally going to use it for myself. I packed a single suitcase, not with things I thought I should bring, but with things that brought me a quiet joy, light linen dresses, a few well-loved novels, my sketching pencils. I also packed my laptop and a small encrypted hard drive. On it was 15 years of my life, meticulously documented every wire transfer to my parents, every credit card bill of Sophia's I had paid, every quiet financial rescue that had kept the Vance family afloat. It was my private ledger, my silent testimony. The flight was long, a journey across continents that felt like a passage to another life. When the plane descended through the clouds, revealing the scattered turquoise jewels of the atolls below, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't realized I was so starved for. The resort was a world away from the stifling formality of Beacon Hill. My villa stood on stilts over the crystal-clear water. The only sounds, the gentle lapping of the waves and the whisper of the breeze through the thatched roof. It was paradise, and it was here, in this perfect serenity, that I would dismantle the beautiful lie they had built. I didn't rush. The first day, I did nothing but swim in the warm ocean and read on my private deck. I let the sun bake away the chill of my mother's words. I needed to act not from a place of anger, but from a place of clarity. On the second morning, I sat on the balcony overlooking the endless blue horizon, opened my laptop, and began my work. It was quiet, methodical, and final. My first call was to the private client division of my bank. I spoke to my relationship manager, a man I had known for years. My voice was calm and professional as I instructed him to cancel all supplementary cards linked to my accounts, effective immediately. There was a brief pause on the other end, then a simple, "Of course, Mia, I'll process that right away." There was no judgment, just efficiency. The first pillar had been removed. My second call was to the owner of a high-end jewelry boutique where my mother and sister were fond of acquiring pieces on family credit, which was, in reality, my credit. I informed the owner politely that I would no longer be guaranteeing any purchases or debts incurred by the Vance family. He was disappointed, but understood. The second pillar crumbled. Finally, I composed an email. It was to a client of mine, a wonderfully kind and discreet philanthropist named Mrs. Harrington. I knew from my professional records that she was the one who had purchased the real Vance necklace at auction years ago. My email was short and polite. I told her I would be in Boston for a special family event, the rehearsal dinner for my sister's wedding, and that I would be honored if she would attend as my personal guest. I mentioned that I had a feeling the other guests would be utterly captivated by a particular piece in her collection. I hit send and closed the laptop. I had laid the groundwork. Now, all I had to do was wait for the storm to break. It didn't take long. A few hours later, my phone, which had been blissfully silent, began to light up. It was a text from my mother. Mia, the card was declined at the caterer. This is mortifying. Fix it immediately. Then another, from Sophia. The boutique just called about the earrings for the bridesmaids. What is going on? Are you trying to ruin everything? The messages started to flood in, a torrent of confusion, then anger, then outright panic. I didn't reply. I turned the phone over, face down on the table. I watched a small, iridescent fish swim in the clear water beneath my villa. The frantic buzzing of the phone seemed to come from another world, a world I was no longer a part of. A message from Sophia flashed on the screen before it went dark. I found a replacement necklace we can rent. I just need you to send the deposit. I smiled, took a sip of my iced tea, and signaled for a waiter. The sun was warm on my skin. I felt nothing but peace. I spent the rest of my week in the Maldives in a state of tranquil detachment. I went snorkeling, had massages, and sketched the changing colors of the sunset. I was healing, recharging, and preparing. My flight back to Boston was booked for the day before the rehearsal dinner. When I landed at Logan Airport, the familiar, crisp, cool air of New England felt different. I wasn't the same woman who had left a week ago. The weight of familial obligation, a burden I had carried for so long I had forgotten what it felt like to be without it, was gone. The day of the rehearsal dinner, I took my time getting ready. I chose a simple, elegant sapphire blue dress that brought out the color of my eyes. I didn't dress for war. I dressed for myself. I felt a calm sense of purpose as I drove to the yacht club where the event was being held. It was an exclusive venue, the kind of place my mother adored for its old-world charm and its implicit promise of social standing. When I walked in, a hush fell over the room. My parents and Sophia stared at me, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and a flicker of desperate hope that my presence meant I had come to my senses. I smiled politely, greeting a few distant relatives before making my way to my assigned table. I was seated at the far end, a clear message of my diminished status. I didn't mind. It gave me a perfect view of the proceedings. The evening wore on with forced cheerfulness. Speeches were made, toasts were raised, all centered around the glorious union of two great families. Sophia was radiant, wearing an expensive new necklace, the rental. I presume that tried its best to imitate the grandeur of the original. Finally, my mother stood up to speak. She spoke eloquently about family, about tradition, about the heirlooms that tie one generation to the next. With a dramatic flourish, she gestured toward Sophia. "And this beautiful necklace," she announced, her voice filled with pride, "a symbol of the Vance legacy, passed down to my beautiful daughter, a testament to our family's enduring history." The guests applauded politely. When she finished, I stood up. "If I may," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the polite chatter, "I'd also like to offer a toast and present my own wedding gift to the happy couple." All eyes turned to me. My mother shot me a look of pure venom. I ignored her and turned toward the entrance. "But first," I continued, "I'd like to introduce a very dear friend of mine who was gracious enough to join us tonight." On cue, the doors to the dining room opened, and in walked Mrs. Harrington, looking regal and elegant, and around her neck, blazing with an inner fire that no replica could ever hope to match, was the real Vance necklace. It was magnificent. The room fell into a dead silence. You could see it instantly, the difference between the masterful original and the merely expensive copy. The light danced off misses. Harrington's necklace, a symphony of brilliance. The one on Sophia's neck suddenly looked dull, lifeless, a fake. No one spoke. My mother's face was ashen. Sophia looked as if she had been struck. My father simply closed his eyes. The lie, so carefully constructed, had been exposed not with an accusation, but with the quiet, irrefutable power of the truth. Mr. Davenport Sr., a man whose face was famously unreadable, slowly stood up. He didn't look at my family. He looked directly at me, and he gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It was a gesture of respect, of understanding. Then he turned to his wife and son and said, in a low voice that carried across the silent room, "I think it's time we left." I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I walked over to Mrs. Harrington, thanked her quietly for coming, and we left together. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I didn't feel a sense of triumph or revenge. I felt a profound, cleansing relief. I hadn't needed to scream or fight. I had simply held up the truth, and the lie had crumbled under its own weight. The wedding, of course, was called off the next morning. The official announcement from the Davenport family was brief and brutally corporate, citing a sudden and unforeseen need for further due diligence. The engagement was postponed indefinitely. The Vance family's grandest social ambition had imploded. In the weeks that followed, I proceeded with the quiet, necessary business of disentanglement through my lawyer. I made it clear that my financial support had ended permanently. There were frantic calls, which I didn't answer. There were threatening letters, which I passed on to my legal team. I heard through the grapevine that the financial pressure became too much, and they were forced to sell the ancestral home on Beacon Hill. I felt a pang of sadness, not for the loss of the house, but for the loss of what it was supposed to represent. 6 months later, I stood in a bright, airy gallery space in a fashionable part of the city. It was the grand opening of my own business, Vance Appraisals and Curations. I had left my prestigious job and struck out on my own, and I had never felt more fulfilled. The gallery was filled with clients, friends, and colleagues, all congratulating me. I was no longer propping up a fake legacy. I was building a real one, based on my own name, my own skill, and my own integrity. My aunt, my father's sister, and the only member of the family who had ever seen me for who I was, handed me a glass of champagne. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, squeezing my hand. That evening, when I returned home, there was a single thick envelope waiting for me. It was from my father. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. I expected a plea, an accusation, another demand. But inside, there was only a single sheet of paper with one line written in his shaky handwriting. "I should have trusted your eye for authenticity sooner." Tucked behind the note was another document, yellowed with age. It was the original certificate of authenticity for the real Vance necklace. He had kept it all these years, a silent acknowledgement of the truth he had helped to hide. I sat there for a long time, looking at the certificate. A single tear rolled down my cheek, not of sadness, but of closure. He had seen the truth. Finally. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't a reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement. And for me, that was enough. The past was no longer a weight, but a story of how I learned to distinguish the truly priceless from the merely worthless, and I had finally found my own inarguable value. In the end, every life is its own kind of appraisal. We are all handed a legacy, a collection of stories, expectations, and roles we are told to cherish. We spend so much of our lives polishing these heirlooms, trying to make them shine, that we rarely stop to examine their true nature. But the most profound act of courage is not to blindly carry that weight, but to have the strength to look closer, to distinguish the beautiful lies from the sometimes difficult truths. True freedom is rarely found in the noise of a confrontation. It is born in the quiet, resolute choice to walk away from a narrative that no longer serves you. It's in the decision to stop being a supporting character in someone else's story and to begin building a life on a foundation of authenticity, a life that is truly, inarguably, your own. Thank you so much for being here and sharing in this journey today. The stories we tell are only half the experience. The other half comes from you. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose your own truth over a comfortable tradition? We would be honored to read your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your insights create a powerful community of strength and resilience here. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. We are so grateful for your presence, and we can't wait to share the next story with you.